All right. Here we go today here at 11 o'clock. All right. Sun's out. I don't know if it's warm or cold outside. Haven't really been outside yet today, but sun is out. There's not a cloud in the sky, at least here where I'm at in Manchester. Looks nice outside. Hopefully you guys had a good Friday morning up to this point. Thank you for joining me today here on Friday, TGIF. But it kind of feels like the same as every old day, to be quite honest. But glad we're here. Made it. It's the end of week 2 to remote learning. So hopefully things have been going well in that regard. I know things haven't been perfect. Still trying to get some things ironed out. But, thank you for your patience. Appreciate that. And we will continue making our own path during these unprecedented times. That's really the only thing that we can do. But my students, welcome. We'll pick right up where we left off and poached yesterday. And a lot happened yesterday. We had Teddy, Bubba Stackhouse, so Officer Stackhouse, and Marge get rescued from the shark tube after the explosion and the aforementioned flooding of the tube. They were rescued by fellow Fun Jungle security staff, and Teddy himself was rescued by his mom, who literally raced across the park and did not talk to JJ Mccracken because she heard on the radios that stuff was going down at Shark Odyssey and Teddy was there. And Hank the Tank, our perp behind the explosion, was taken into custody and was interrogated by Marge, Bub Stackhouse, and JJ Mccracken himself while using Furious George, taking the fact that Hank the Tank was wearing an orange Astros cap. They took advantage of the fact that would set Furious George off by saying that, he basically could tell when someone is lying and he doesn't like lying. So they used that quite effectively to get the story out of Hank that, yes, he is working for Walter Ogilvy. Yes, he is trying to sabotage things at Fun Jungle. So Fun Jungle will look bad and therefore lose money and potentially have to go out of business if they hurt it enough financially. He, however, clearly stated repeatedly he did not take Kazoo. Stealing Kazoo was the original plan, and that's where Charlie Connor comes into this plot, because he talked to Charlie about how to get Kazoo. But the theft of Gazoo happened just before they could form a plan, and therefore Walter Ogilvy ordered, we need to make a bigger splash, hence the explosion. Hank said he didn't mean for people to be in the harm anybody with the explosion. He had timed it so no one would be there, and he was just as surprised to have Bubba Stackhouse, Large Marge, and Teddy Fitzroy in the shark tube. So that unfortunately leads us back to that. Bubba then circled back to Teddy and said, look, unfortunately, I hate to do this because, you saved my life, Teddy, but you're still our number one suspect now for Kazoo. And JJ Mccracken pretty much kind of said the same thing and basically kind of very haughtily told his parents that, look, maybe you need to own up to the problem that your son is the problem. And Marge was beside herself because now she still gets to, in her mind, she still gets to take Teddy to juvenile hall and nail him for Kazoo's theft. So we kind of left Teddy kind of broken because he thought Hank was the guy. And now he's wrong. And because he's wrong, He's not going to go to jail, possibly. So we're going to pick up with chapter 20, titled Under Arrest. For the second time that day, I was marched through Fun Jungle in handcuffs. Once again, Bubba and Marge each held an arm of mine. Meanwhile, Hank the Tank was back in Fun Jungle's security holding cell. Industrial sabotage was much bigger crime than the local police were prepared to handle, so JJ had called in some friends in the government and asked them to send federal agents. Mom and Dad walked alongside Marge and Bubba and me. Although they had given up on arguing that a mistake had been made, aware that the argument would only fall on deaf ears, now they were merely doing their best to comfort me. Don't worry, Mom said. We'll get you out of this as soon as we can. And we'll find the real thief, Dad assured me, and everything will be right again. I know, I said, although it probably didn't sound very convincing. I knew my parents were lying to me, or at least they could only hope that they had said was true. The fact was, I was in a huge amount of trouble. Whoever had really poached the koala had set me up perfectly. All the evidence pointed to me, while there hadn't been so much as a shred to implicate them. The only hint that someone else was involved at all was that the koala hair and poop Marge had found in my room. But I knew the argument that it had been planted there would seem very weak. Who in their right mind would plant koala poop? With me in hand, the police had no incentive to look for anyone else. That left Mom and Dad to continue investigating, and we were all out of leads. The best we had was a tip Marge had received that the koala hair was in my room. I assumed that it had come from the real thief, but there was no way to know that for sure. Marge refused to share anything about that tip. She only admitted that it was a phone call and that it had been placed that previous afternoon. All in all, I ended up the perfect patsy. We passed through the front gates into the massive parking lot. There were a cluster of news vans by the park entrance. Pete Thwacker stood in the glare of the minicam lights, talking to several reporters at once. I caught a few bits of his canned speech between gusts of wind. We've simply had a technical glitch at Shark Odyssey. I promise you, it's nothing serious. No one was hurt, but the exhibit might have to be shut down temporarily while we make repairs to the viewing experience for all of our valued guests. Despite my dour mood, I almost laughed. It was amazing how well Pete could twist the truth with a straight face. Although Tracy had threatened to fire him after the fake koala disaster, I knew she'd never do it. The park needed him too badly. The police cars were parked a long way from the entrance. Even Marge understood that it was bad for business to have the police right at the front gates. So she asked Bubba to park well off to the side. Thankfully, the sleet had finally stopped, but the parking lot was now coated with an inch of cold slush, and bone-chilling winds blasted us as we crossed the wide expanse of asphalt. "Wait!" someone yelled. "Teddy, wait!" Christy Sullivan was running after us, waving frantically. Marge tried to ignore her and keep walking, but Bubba stopped. At first, I thought this was because Bubba wasn't in any hurry to take me away. But when I saw the excited look on his face, I figured out the real reason. He thought Christy was cute. "Can I help you?" he asked, trying to sound as suave as possible. "You're making a big mistake," Christy told them. "There is no way Teddy stole Gazoo. He would never do anything like that." "Well, he did," Marge said, though before she could go on, Bubba puffed up his chest and interrupted. "Officer Bubba Stackhouse at your service. What is your name, ma'am?" "Christy Sullivan, and I'm a keeper in the small mammal house, though I worked with Kazu until he was taken." Christy looked at me apologetically. "I'm so sorry, Teddy. I only heard the news just now when I got to work. I came as fast as I could." Do you happen to have any evidence that someone else could have taken Kazoo? Bubba asked. Of course. I shared my leads with Marge days ago. Charlie Connor, Freddie Malloy, and Flora Hancock all had motives. That wasn't evidence, Marge puffed. That was speculation. The cold hard facts say Teddy did this. No, they don't, I said. I was framed. Oh, not this malarkey again, Marge sighed. Let's go, Bubba. We've wasted enough time as it is. Arresting the wrong person is wasting time, Christy countered. While you've been focused on Teddy, the real thief still has Kazoo, and time is running out. That koala will starve to death soon. He won't if Teddy admits where he's hidden him, Marge snapped and then dragged me away. Bubba graciously tipped his hat to Christy, still trying to make a good impression despite the circumstances. It was a pleasure to meet you, ma'am. Should you come across any concrete evidence that exonerates Teddy here, feel free to contact me directly. Christy ignored him, tailing after me. Teddy, is there anything I could do? I don't think so, I said. Thanks for trying, though. Yes, Mom said. It was nice of you to run all that this way after us on such a nasty day. Christy waved us off. Oh, it's no big deal. I'm happy to get out of the small mammal house. It stinks in there. She shivered in disgust. All those rats and bats and stuff. None of them were anywhere near as cute as Kazoo. Something about this statement had struck a nerve with me. I knew Christy was trying to put my mother at ease, and yet the disgust she registered had been real. A thought began to take shape in my mind. I glanced at my father's watch. It was nearly 11 a.m. Christy, I asked, did you say you just got to work now? Christy shrugged, not nearly as bothered about being 2 hours late as she should have been. Yeah, but I'll stay later tonight. It doesn't really make a difference. The animals don't seem to care. We reached the police car, which was now covered with a thick layer of sleet. Marge had held her hand up to Christy, stopping her in her tracks. The time for chit-chat is over. Teddy has to go now. Christy nodded, understanding, and waved a goodbye to me. Be strong, Teddy, she said, and then wiped away a tear and turned back toward Fun Jungle. Bubba opened the police car door and then stepped away, leaving me with my parents. You can have a little time to say goodbye, he told us. Marge rolled her eyes as if Bubba's decency was a sign of weakness somehow. I looked into the car. The windows shrouded in sleet. The back seat was dark and cave-like. Just thinking about getting in made me shudder. I turned back to my parents, who knelt in the cold slush to hug me goodbye. Mom was crying. Dad looked as sad as I had ever seen him. And yet, while I should have felt upset or angry, I didn't. Instead, my mind was racing. I turned back to Christy and watched her walk away, in no particular hurry to get back to her job. Suddenly, the thought I had been working on had become clear to me. Christy isn't a very good keeper, is she? I asked. Mom and Dad blinked at me, surprised I'd chosen this moment to ask that question, but aware I must have had a good reason. Why do you say that? Dad asked. The animals are all on strict schedules, right? I asked. Even the ones in the small animal house. Although Christy said the animals don't care if she gets here 2 hours late, it does matter to them, doesn't it? It should, Mom said, intrigued. The animals might not have to be fed at 9, but the keepers still need to be here by then to check on them, make sure that they're healthy, and clean their cages and things like that. You're right. Doesn't sound like Christy's paying much attention to her animals. This is all very interesting, Marge said sarcastically, but as much as I'd like to hear about it, we can't just sit here all day. Teddy, get in the car. She grabbed my arm and pulled me away. Mom lashed out and caught my other arm. Wait, she said. I've waited long enough, Marge told her. Then another minute won't make any difference, will it? Mom said, right in Marge's face, and stared her down. So unclench for once, Marjorie. This is important. Marge was so cowed that she let go of me and shrank back. Mom turned back to me. Any trace of anger was now gone. Now, then, Teddy, tell me what you're thinking. Well, I began, I don't think Christy was paying as much attention to Gazoo as she should have been either. She had these huge stacks of fashion magazines on the desk in her office. The only reason there'd be for that would be if she was reading on the job rather than working. They might have belonged to one of the other keepers, Bubba suggested, already smitten enough with Christy to defend her honor. Maybe, I admitted, but Christy also told me the other day that taking care of a fake koala was even more work than the real one. She said that the real Kazu was easy to take care of, but he shouldn't have been if she was really doing her job. I was in the exhibit with her the night everyone thinks I took Kazu. She didn't even check on him. She only changed his water. Bubba started to protest, but I cut him off. I'm not saying she didn't like Kazu. And I know she learned a lot about koalas and was really good at teaching people about them. But that's not the same thing as taking good care of them, right? Right, Mom and Dad agreed. So she didn't take care of Gazoo. Marge groaned. What's the big deal? Koalas don't move much, I explained. They stay in the same place for hours at a time. Whoever stole Kazu replaced him with a stuffed animal, and the tourists couldn't even tell the difference. So if Christy wasn't paying as much attention to Kazu as she was supposed to, maybe she didn't notice that he had been replaced by a stuffed animal either. My parents' eyes suddenly lit up with understanding, and Dad grinned. In fact, she might have not noticed for an entire day, he said. Meaning what? Marge asked. Teddy didn't steal Gazoo the night that he hid in the exhibit, because Gazoo had been stolen the night before that. It took a moment for Marge to comprehend, then she frowned. That's ridiculous. Is it? Bubba asked. No, Mom told him. It's completely plausible. The thief took Kazu and replaced him with a stuffed koala. But Christy didn't notice, and since Christy was the only keeper working the next day, there was no one else to catch the mistake. Therefore, it was more than 24 hours before anyone realized Kazu was gone, Dad added. But when you checked the security tapes, you only checked the ones for the night that you thought Kazu had been stolen, not for the night before, and when he was really taken. Which explains why you only saw Teddy and not the real thief. Marge shook her head violently. I don't buy it. It wouldn't be that hard to check, Dad told her. Security saves 2 weeks' worth of footage, and we simply need to check the tapes from 4 nights ago. And if Teddy's right, the true thief will be on there. Sounds like a wild goose chase to me, Marge muttered, then reached for me again. But before she could grab my arm, however, Bubba grabbed hers. Hold on now. He said, the last thing I want to do is lock up some kid who doesn't deserve it. There is no harm in making absolutely sure we've got the right person. Marge shot him a look of betrayal and then pulled her arm free. Have it your way. But when this all turns out to be a waste of time, don't complain to me. She slammed the door of the police car and led the way back into the park. Mom and Dad turned to Bubba. Thank you, Mom said. I don't like making mistakes, Bubba told her. We'd better hurry, Dad said. If Gazoo was taken when Teddy says, then he's been without food for nearly 4 days now, not 3. Oh no, I said, growing worried. I hadn't thought of that. Now that Gazoo's life was in even more danger, there was no time to waste. We all hustled back across the parking lot and through the employee entrance and toward the administration building. Pete Thacker was heading up the front steps as we arrived. His press conference was now over. Now that the cameras weren't rolling, he was no longer smiling. Instead, he was frowning at something on his smartphone. Mom approached him as we all headed into the building. Pete, I was wondering, did you have a hand in hiring Christy Sullivan to work at Koalaville? I sure did, Pete replied without looking up from his phone. She's great, isn't she? In the lobby, there's a great deal of security. Normally, it would have taken my family several minutes to pass, but because we were with Marge and the other guards waved us through. Does Christy have any sort of certification in animal care? Pete pursed his lips and thought. I don't believe so, but honestly, how hard is it to care for a koala? All those things do is sleep. Christy had something that's a lot harder to come by. Stage presence. Seriously, guys, Pete is an idiot. He hired somebody that's not even certified to work with animals to care for this koala. Bonehead. You mean you hired her because she's attractive, Mom said. Pete shrugged. Studies show that interacting with attractive women greatly increases our guests' enjoyment. Mom frowned. So instead of hiring a qualified keeper, you hired a piece of eye candy. Hey, it wasn't only my decision, Pete snapped. A lot of people weighed in on Christy. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have yet another crisis to deal with. Besides the Shark Tank, Marge asked worriedly. Yes, Pete sighed, but not nearly as bad. But it's still a crisis. Some moron leaked photos of our new tiger cubs to the press. He held up his phone, displaying a picture of them. They're all over the internet already. JJ's pitching a fit and demanding to know who's responsible. Suddenly, yet another mystery became clear to me. I'd check out Arthur Connick, I said. I overheard him try to sell them the other day. Pete turned back to me stunned. You did? Why didn't you say anything? I didn't know what he was talking about pictures. I thought he might have been trying to sell Gazoo, but he was definitely doing something illegal. He said he could go to jail, and he works in carnivore control. Pete broke into a huge grin and he turned to Marge. Could you go find Arthur? I've got another fish to fry right now, Marge said, but I'll send someone else. The elevator pinged open in the lobby and all of us piled into it, except for Pete. Thanks, Teddy, he said. If it's really Arthur, I owe you big. Bubba turned to me and chuckled. You're a one-man police department, kid. Marge glowered at me in response. Everyone's like a Teddy right now. Marge just wants to throw him in the slammer. It's funny. The elevator doors were just about to shut when Tracy Boyd slipped through them. She regarded us in surprise. What are you all doing here? Heading to the security control room, Dad told her. He explained my theory of how Kazu had really been stolen one night earlier than anyone realized. Tracy's jaw dropped as she listened. When we reached our floor, she got off with us instead of continuing up to her office. I've got to see this for myself, she said. The security control room was a small room. 2 guards sat before a huge bank of monitors, which displayed camera feeds from all over the park. I caught glimpses of the front gates, Hippo River, the Safariland tram loading stations, and 24 other locations. The guards reacted with surprise when we burst in. There was barely room for all of us inside. Marge started to say something, but Tracy beat her to it. I need to see the video from the koala exhibit the night before we think Kazoo was stolen, she told the guards. The night before? One guard repeated in confusion. That's right. Tracy said 4 nights ago. Bring it up. Which cameras? The other guard asked. All of them, Tracy replied. The guards nodded and quickly typed in the commands into the system. The computers that controlled all the security footage hummed busily. Within seconds, camera views from the night in question began popping up on the screens, replacing the live feeds. Soon we had all 4 angles of the door to the koala exhibit keeper's office, as well as several other feeds showing the various locations in Koalaville. Sync them up, then play them all at once, Tracy ordered, starting with closing time. The guards dutifully obeyed. They synced the video to 5 o'clock. We watched as Christy Sullivan herded the last of the tourists out of the exhibit, then went around to the office door. After only a few minutes, she emerged again, having taken care of Gazoo for the evening. She zipped her winter jacket, clapped on her earmuffs, and hustled toward the employee parking lot, looking like she was in a big hurry to get home. Oh my, Mom gasped. What, Dad asked. She didn't lock the door, Mom said. Back up the tape, Tracy ordered. The guards did, and we watched again, this time in slow motion. Sure enough, Christy exited the koala exhibit and, in her haste, didn't even bother to make sure the door closed behind her. On a normal day, the door probably would have swung shut on its own, but a gust of wind had caught it and prevented this. Instead, the door came to rest slightly against the jamb, without completely closing. Someone could get in, guys. JJ spent millions on the security for this place, Tracy grumbled, and yet none of it does any good when some idiot doesn't remember to lock the darn doors. I was pretty astonished myself. After all the time I'd spent trying to figure out how the thief had so cleverly outwitted the security system, it turned out that they'd simply gotten lucky. First, Christy had left the door open, and then she hadn't noticed the crime had been committed for an entire day. On the monitors, Christy hurried off, unaware of the unlocked door. But someone else was watching. Christy wasn't even out of sight before a figure stepped out of the merchandise tent, clutching a stuffed koala. We couldn't see the person's face, though. They were wearing a winter jacket with the hood pulled up to shield them from the cold. Whoever it was looked at the stuffed koala they were holding, then at the exhibit, then at the stuffed koala again. Then they approached the teacher's office and tried the door. It swung open easily, and the thief slipped inside. The thief didn't seem concerned about the cameras at all. In fact, the idea that there might be security never seemed to have appeared to have occurred to them. They were only inside for a few minutes, and when they emerged once again, holding Kazoo rather than the stuffed koala. Holy cow, Bubba said. Teddy, it looks like you're innocent. Mom and Dad cried out with joy. We told you, Mom exclaimed to everyone. Tracy turned to Marge, annoyed. A 12-year-old figured this out, and you didn't. Marge didn't respond, nor did she make any attempt to apologize for the relentlessly trying to pin Kazoo's theft on me. Instead, she glared at me angrily, apparently hating me now more than she'd ever had before. While I was thrilled to see Marge get dressed down and hugely relieved to be proved innocent, I was still worried about Gazoo. On the security monitors, the koala certainly wasn't happy about taken out into the cold, and he wailed and squirmed wildly. The thief was handling Gazoo roughly in response, which made me think that the koala probably hadn't been treated well at all over the last few days. Can we find an angle that shows our thief's face? Tracy asked. The guards ran through various camera angles, but despite them all, the thief got lucky again. The jacket hood shielded their face perfectly. There wasn't a single direct view. We couldn't even get a glimpse of hair to determine the color, or for what that matter, to tell whether the thief was a man or a woman. Everyone else is equally frustrated. A dozen cameras, and there's not one position to get us an ID, Bubba sighed. On the monitors, the thief tried to stuff Kazoo into a backpack. The koala fought back with surprising force, clawing with all four of its limbs. The thief responded in kind, angrily smacking the koala, which then sank its teeth into one of the thief's hands. Then the thief recoiled in pain, though we still couldn't get a view of the face. The thief was so focused on the koala, on forcing the koala into the pack, that their head was completely angled downward. At least Gazoo is doing a real good job on the jerk, Dad said. That's not surprising, Mom explained. Koalas look so innocent, but people always expect them to be docile. But they can be extremely aggressive. They have sharp teeth and claws, and if you back them into a corner, they will do what it takes to defend themselves. The thief had finally managed to overpower Kazoo and cram the poor creature into the backpack. Then, keeping their head down, the thief raced off camera and vanished from view. I don't believe it, Bubba groaned. Not a single clear mugshot in the whole bunch. Maybe we can still find one, Tracy turned to the guards. Go back over all that footage frame by frame and see if you can find anything remotely usable. And then check the feeds of every camera between Koalaville and the main entrance. Our thief must have passed one of them. That could take hours, one guard complained. I don't care, Tracy barked. Just do it. I want to know who took Kazoo. Please, Mom pleaded. do what you can. Gazoo has been without food for almost 4 days. He's running out of time. We'll do our best, the guard said, but there's a chance that this will all come up empty. If the thief kept the hood over his face the whole time, we might never know who took Kazu. My parents sadly nodded acceptance of this. Actually, that's not true, I said. I know who did it. Everyone in the room turned to me stunned. Who? Tracy asked. Vance Jessup, I replied. Guys, I think you're going to be in luck. I'm going to read a little bit longer today because we are almost done with the book. We have 1 chapter left and a short epilogue. All right, so chapter 21, Capture. So we know Vance took Kazoo. Maybe that explains why his hand was all bandaged up. The showdown between him and Teddy in the bathroom with the Toilet of Doom. Even though I'd proven my innocence, I ended up in the back of a police car. Only now I was a guest rather than a prisoner. Bubba was at the wheel. Marge was riding shotgun. Mom and Dad were wedged in the back seat on either side of me. Tracy Boyd had demanded that I go along to help ID Vance Jessup. This made Marge even angrier than before. She could barely even look at me. Instead, she stared out the windshield, her jaw clenched so tightly I thought her teeth might shatter. Since Vance was a minor, Bubba was still on the case, as were a few his fellow juvenile officers, who were following us in the second police car. Bubba had called Dillinut at my middle school, who had confirmed Vance was there. Once he learned of the crime, Mr. Dillinut promised to take Vance to detention immediately and keep him there until we had arrived. Now we were all racing down the road toward town at 90 miles an hour, sirens wailing. It was as much fun as some of the thrill rides at Fun Jungle. Vance's hands and fingers were all bandaged up, I explained as we rocketed along. I thought it was because he had been in some fights, but Kazoo obviously did it instead. Vance's hands weren't hurt until after Kazoo was stolen. There's 1,000 ways someone could get their fingers bandaged up, Marge grumbled. That's not enough to convict someone. We could check under his bandages, and when we get there, the bite marks ought to be pretty obvious. And what if he claims a dog bit him instead? Marge asked. Then we bring in an expert, Mom said. I'm sure that any zoo vets can tell the difference between a dog bite and a koala bite. Plus, there's other evidence against Vance, I told Marge. Like the tip that you got to search my room for koala fur and poop. That had to be from Vance. How so? Marge asked. Because of when you got it, I explained. If someone had really wanted to frame me for stealing Kazoo, it would have made sense to call you days ago, right after the theft. But you didn't get a tip to tell yesterday afternoon. Vance must have known you didn't have any idea who he was. He was going to get away with the crime, so what's the point of going through so much trouble to plant evidence in my room and alert the police about it? Marge looked at me blankly. This obviously hadn't occurred to her. He did it to settle a score with you, Dad concluded. Exactly, I agreed. I embarrassed Vance really badly at school yesterday. He wanted to get even. That's why he framed me, not because he was worried about getting caught. What did you do to him? Bubba asked. I dunked him in the Toilet of Doom, I replied, and then thought to add, it was self-defense. Bubba laughed out loud. I could see why he would be embarrassed, all right. He turned to Marge. You recorded the call, right? We could try to do a voice match with this Jessup kid. Between that and him having bite marks on his hands, I'd say that's all the evidence that we need. Dad said, it'd be better if you could just get him to own up to the crime and tell us where Kazoo, the koala is. We need to find Kazoo and find him fast. There's just one thing that's missing here, Marge said. Stubbornly, a motive. Why'd this kid steal the koala in the first place? Because he's a jerk, I said. He doesn't mean He does mean things all the time. He's the kid who forced me to dump the fake arm in the shark tank the other day. He probably just saw the opportunity to cause trouble, and he took it. Marge shook her head. Doesn't sound very convincing to me. Mom then said, you didn't seem nearly as concerned about motives when you tried to arrest Teddy. Teddy has a history of causing trouble, Marge countered. He's never stolen anything, Mom shot back. And I'll bet this Vance Jessup has. She looked to Bubba for confirmation. Bubba nodded. We've had a few run-ins, but only for little stuff, shoplifting and such. Nothing like this before. I considered the crime again. It did seem a little odd for Vance to swipe Kazoo for no good reason. I had the sense that I was missing something, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. My thoughts had turned to the koala. If Vance had taken it, he hadn't put much thought into the crime. He had really succeeded in by blind luck. It was doubtful that the kid had the slightest idea of how to care for an exotic animal. My guess was poor Gazoo was probably had suffered greatly in Vance's hands, and I wondered if he was even still alive. We'd skidded to a stop at the front of my middle school. The second police car parked right behind us. We all piled up and raced up the front walk. It was lunchtime. The entire school was gathered at the windows of the cafeteria, excitedly watching the arrival of the police. Before we even made it into the school doors, Mr. Dillinut exited looking very worried. Where's Vance Jessup? Bubba demanded. I'm not sure, Mr. Dillinut admitted. What? Bubba shouted. I thought you put him in detention. I did, the principal replied, but he got the jump on us. He told the proctor that he had to go to the bathroom, and instead he must have fled the grounds. How long ago? Marge asked. Mr. Dillinut tugged at the collar of his shirt uncomfortably. I'm not sure. Up to 15 minutes, maybe. Bubba grimaced. He could be anywhere in town by now. He turned to his other officers. Go over to his house and stake it out in case he shows up there. The policemen raced back to their car and peeled out. He's not going back to his house, Marge muttered. No kid with an ounce of brains would do that. That's why the rest of us are going to comb the town for him. Bubba said, maybe we'll get lucky. I glanced back toward the cafeteria windows. Maybe we won't have to, I said. I'll bet Vance's friends know where he's gone. Without waiting for an answer, I ran toward the cafeteria. Everyone else followed me, but I got there ahead of them. I burst into the cafeteria and instantly spotted Tim Jim. It wasn't hard to find them, as they were a good 6 inches taller than almost anyone else in the school. Up until that moment, I'd been afraid of them, but I surprised myself and everyone else by storming directly toward them. I need to talk to you, I demanded. Xavier rushed in my path, apparently thinking I'd gone insane. What are you doing? He asked. In case you've forgotten, these guys tried to shove your head into a toilet yesterday. I haven't forgotten anything, I said, and then slipped past him and yelled at Tim Jim. Where's Vance keeping the koala? Tim and Jim were thrown. They weren't used to kids confronting them like this. Both did their best to play dumb, given that they were dumb. It shouldn't have been that hard. And yet, they didn't do a very good job of it. It was a few seconds too long before one of them could figure out what a fake innocent response might be. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about, I said. Vance stole the koala, stole Kazoo, didn't he? No, they said at once, though it was obvious a lie. I was about to lay into them again, but before I could, someone behind me shouted, That's not true, and you both know it. I spun around to find Violet Grace there. She seemed stunned that the words had come out of her mouth. Everyone in the room suddenly turned toward her. Even my parents, Marge and Bubba, regarded her with surprise. She shrank under the collective gaze, looking guilty. You knew about this? I asked. Violet averted her eyes, embarrassed. Yes, Vance told me about the koala. Why? I asked. Because he stole it from me, Violet said. Everyone in the cafeteria gasped. Violet quickly tried to explain things. I didn't ask him to do it. He just did it thinking I'd be impressed or something. Why would Vance be trying to impress you like that? I asked. Because he had a crush on her since the 3rd grade, Xavier said. Now the entire school turned to Xavier, surprised. None of you noticed? He asked the crowd. Really? I know he's tried to keep it a secret, but the guy practically drools every time Violet walks by. Violet blushed, embarrassed by this. I didn't know he liked me, not until he showed up at my house the other night with the koala. The whole story suddenly came tumbling out of her. After keeping it bottled up inside for the past 4 days, she couldn't contain it anymore. My parents were out at a school meeting, so I was all alone, and suddenly Vance shows up at the door saying he has a surprise for me. He totally freaked me out. First of all, he was all cut up and bleeding everywhere, and then he pulls this koala out of his backpack and says he got it for me. I thought it was a stuffed animal at first, but then it jumped out and scared the holy heck out of me. I always thought koalas were cute and all, but this one was mean. It started running around my house, squealing like a pig, knocking everything over and totally destroying the place. I got up on the couch and told Vance to get it out. But Vance didn't do anything. Instead, he sat there trying to explain that I should like it because he brought this crazy thing to my house. He said he was going to get me some more some stupid stuffed koala at first, but then he realized he could get me a real one, which was like 1,000 times cooler, as if I'd ever want this stinky, screeching, freaky thing. I thought back to the tapes that I seen of Vance the night he stole Kazoo. He had originally been holding the stuffed koala, the one he had intended to give Violet. And then Vance had seen Christy leave the office door open. So, on the spur of the moment, he decided to bring Violet the real thing instead, thinking he would really win her over that way. Then he'd swap the toy for Kazoo, only it had all worked out far worse than he had expected. I don't think he knew the koala would behave like that, I explained. He probably thought it would behave like a living doll. Well, it wasn't, Violet said. Vance is an idiot. He didn't think anything through. He said he'd gone to Fun Jungle to scope out the shark tank for some prank and then just swipe Gazoo on a whim. I groaned, regretting the day I suggested the shark tank prank to Xavier even more. Not only had that led to Vance forcing me to pull the prank, but it had also indirectly led to the theft of Kazoo. Why didn't you tell anyone about this? I asked Violet. Because Vance told me not to, she replied. I think he really expected that I would just fall in love with him when I saw he had stolen a koala for me. And he was really upset when I didn't. I mean, like super angry. I told him he better take the koala back, and he said he couldn't because then they'd know he stole it. So then I said I was going to call the police, and he said if I did that, he'd... Violet trailed off, looking scared. Did he threaten you? Mom asked. Violet nodded, fighting back tears, then looked to me again. I tried reaching out to you anyhow, though. I gave you my phone number. I grimaced, feeling like a fool. Under normal circumstances, I would have called Violet, even if I had suspected she was only using me to get to Summer. However, a lot of other things had happened that day. Truth was, I'd forgotten all about Violet, and that she had given me her number at all to begin with. But Vance hadn't, I realized. He had been watching us through the cafeteria window. He had seen Violet give me her number, and it made him think I was a threat. Maybe he thought Violet was tipping me off about him and the koala, or maybe he thought she was showing interest in me rather than him. Whatever the case, he decided to get rid of me. He had just learned I was a suspect in the koala theft, so he'd snuck into our home, planted the evidence in my room to frame me. He hadn't done it as a revenge for embarrassing him, as I originally suspected. He had done it to keep me away from Violet. Do you have any idea where Vance is keeping Kazoo? I asked her. It's important. He's dying. Violet shook her head sadly. Vance took the koala from my house that night, and I never saw it again. I was hoping he'd take it back to Fun Jungle, but when he didn't, I was afraid to ask. And if I called the cops, he'd know I was the one who turned him in. She shifted her attention toward Tim Jim angrily. But they'd know. Vance tells them everything. We all looked toward Tim Jim, only to find that while Violet had been distracting all of our attention, they had been sliding toward the door. Now they made a break for it. Bubba and Marge raced after him, but the boys had too big of a head start. They were at the door before the police could take 3 steps. As Tim Jim opened the door, though, Ethan Sokol and Dash Alexander tackled them. The football players broadsided them so hard I could hear the wind getting knocked out of them from across the rim. The twins ended up flat on their backs, the jocks pinning them to the floor. "Tell us where the koala is," Dash warned, "or we pound both of you into dog food." "Even you two meatheads aren't strong enough to do that," Tim shot back. "Or won't be just Dash and me," Ethan told him. "It'll be all of us." He pointed toward the cafeteria. The entire student body nodded in agreement. If there was one thing that could unite every single person in our school, it was saving a koala from Vance Jessup. Even a few of the cafeteria ladies had joined the crowd. Tim Jim now gulped in fear. "His uncle has a garage in town," Jim blurted out. "Jessup Automotive. He's been keeping the koala there." I turned back to my parents and the police. Bubba Stackhouse gave me a thumbs up sign. This was the info that he needed, and then waved for me to come quickly. I started toward him, but Violet caught my arm. "I'm so sorry," she told me. "I should have told someone sooner. If that koala's dead, I'll never forgive myself." "It's not your fault," I said. "Trust me, I know how intimidating Vance Jessup can be." Violet smiled, then released my arm. "Go get him," she said. I grinned back and then raced out of the cafeteria. The entire student body followed me. Jessup Automotive wasn't that far from school, and this was the most exciting thing that had ever happened in town. No one wanted to miss it. They swarmed past Mr. Dillonut, ignoring his demands that everyone get back to class. "This is not a holiday," he yelled impotently at the crowd. This is an unexcused absence for all of you." Bubba, Marge, Dad, Mom, and I all piled back into the police car, and we peeled out of the parking lot. Despite the urgency of the situation, I noticed both of my parents were grinning at me. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing," Mom said cheerfully. "It just seems that you made a lot of friends." "Who was that cute girl that gave you her phone number?" Dad asked. I could feel my ears turning red. "Nobody," I lied. "She sure looked like somebody to me." Dad looked at Mom, and they both stifled a laugh, as though this was all hilarious. I tried to change the subject. "Here's what I don't understand. Why would Vance steal Gazoo just to impress a girl? How could he possibly think that would work? Wouldn't be the first time a man has done something incredibly stupid to get a woman's attention," Dad told me. "In fact, I'll bet there isn't a man out there who hasn't made a fool of himself for love." He looked back at Mom, and they both smiled again. "I still don't get it," I said. "You will someday," Dad told me. "Maybe even sooner than you think." It didn't take long to cover the few blocks to the garage, especially since the police car could tear through town at well over the speed limit. Jessup Automotive sat at the end of Main Street, right on the edge of a small commercial district. It was a small, old-fashioned garage and gas station that had recently gone out of business. The windows were boarded up, and behind it was a large yard surrounded by a chain-link fence. The yard was a maze of storage sheds and broken-down cars that had been pilfered for spare parts over the years. Bubba braked to a stop by the gas pumps. He and Marge leapt out of the car, though when my parents and I tried to follow, they turned on us. "Stay here," Bubba told me. "It could be dangerous back there." "But," I began. "When we find the kid, we'll bring him out here for you to ID," Marge said. "Now just sit tight and keep your nose out of our business for once." I tried to protest, but Mom signaled me to let it go. Marge and Bubba slunk toward the boarded-up garage with their guns raised, like they were infiltrating a nest of professional assassins instead of going after a teenage boy who had stolen a koala. They both seemed very excited to have an actual mission for once. Idiots, Mom muttered. They'll probably end up shooting each other. Bubba banged on the garage door. Vance Jessup, we know you're in there. Come out with the koala. There was no answer. My parents and I climbed out of the police car. It was too cramped and stuffy to wait inside, but we heeded Marge's warning and we didn't try to follow her. Instead, we waited by the gas pumps. Behind us, people had begun to emerge from the businesses on Main Street intrigued by the police activity. They filed out of the real estate office and the furniture store and the diner. One man came out of the barber shop halfway through a shave and his face was still covered up with lather. The garage door was open. Bubba and Marge slipped inside. A noise began to grow in the distance, a great murmur of voices. I glanced down Main Street. Several blocks away, a horde of students charged around the corner. It was my whole school, racing to see Vance's capture. A weird, piercing screech suddenly had come from the junkyard. It sounded like a large bird being strangled. That's a koala, Mom exclaimed. I never heard a Kazoo make a sound before, but then I never seen him in distress. Vance Jessup burst out of the storage shed, racing through the junky cars, wearing a backpack from which the angry koala noises emanated from. Since the police were blocking any exit through the garage, he ran through the chain-link fence instead. He's out of here, Dad called. He's out here, Dad called to the police, while Mom yelled, he's getting away. We heard Bubba and Marge scrambling somewhere back in the junkyard, but Vance had gotten a huge jump on them. He quickly scaled the fence and leapt to the ground, and now the only thing staying between him and the escape was me and my parents. Before we even knew what we were doing, we were running to stop him. Mom and Dad flanked him on both sides, while I ended up facing him head-on. Vance froze, looking from one of us to the next, unsure as to what to do. He no longer seemed tough and menacing to me. Instead, he seemed like a scared, desperate kid. There were a lot of new scratches on his face, including a slash of claw marks across his face. Kazu was thrashing about in his backpack, screeching and howling. There's no point in running, Dad told Vance. There's nowhere you can go. All we want is Gazoo, Mom said, trying to sound as soothing as possible. His life is in danger. Just hand him over and we'll tell the police that you cooperated. Vance relaxed only for a moment, as though ready to give himself up. But then Marge and Bubba burst out of the garage and charged toward him. Get him, Marge howled. Vance bolted. As I was the smallest and weakest of the people boxing him in, he came right at me. Dad and Mom grabbed for him, but he dodged them. And without really thinking about it, I planted myself in his path. Stop, I yelled. Move it, loser, Vance yelled back. Though it only took Vance a second to reach me, 100 thoughts went through my head. I considered getting out of the way, but decided against it. Every moment still counted for the koala, so I stood my ground. Even though Vance was much bigger than me, and coming on like a freight train. My father's advice about how to deal with bullies came back to me. Just pop them in the nose, he said. I'd never hit anyone in my life, but when I thought about all the things Vance had done to me, harassing me, threatening me with swirlies, framing me for a crime that he committed, not to mention all the mean things he had done to Xavier and a dozen other kids, and how he had threatened to hurt Violet if she told the police of what he had done, and how he'd been so rough with Gazoo when he had stolen the koala, and probably even rougher over the past few days. The next thing I knew, my hand had tightened into a fist, and it was swinging right toward Vance's face. I connected a lot harder than I expected, because Vance was running right at me. He could have gone around, but his inner bully had kicked in. He wasn't nearly trying to get away. He was trying to flatten me in the process. I don't think it ever occurred to him that I might ever fight back. I caught Vance right on the chin so hard that his teeth clacked. His head snapped back and he wobbled on his heels. For a moment, he stared at me in shock, as though unable to believe that I had punched him. And then he pitched forward, passing out on the ground at my feet. Mom and Dad stared at him for a moment. Then Dad turned to Mom and grinned. "I told you that would work," he said. Mom sighed, but then stole a glance at me. I could see that despite her best intentions, she was actually proud of what I had done. She quickly turned her attention to Kazoo. Luckily, Vance had collapsed face first, so he hadn't landed on the koala, which was still thrashing about in his backpack. It's okay. It's all right, Kazoo, Mom cooed softly. You're safe now. We're here to help. To my surprise, Kazoo calmed rather quickly, soothed by my mom's voice. Mom unfastened the clasp on the backpack and the koala poked his head out. He was not in good shape. He had lost a lot of weight in the last few days. His hair was matted and dirty, and a few patches had fallen out. He shivered in the cold. It seemed that he used the last of his energy trying to fight his way out of the backpack. Now he simply collapsed on his side. He didn't even try to fight as Mom picked him up and wrapped him in her jacket. Is he going to be all right? I asked. Yes, Mom said. Thanks to you. Dad put an arm around my shoulder. When Mom's back was turned, he winked and whispered, Great punch, kiddo. Trust me, that guy is never going to bother you again. Marge and Bubba arrived, gasping for breath after their brief run. Marge looked like she was about to lay into me for getting involved in police business, but before she could, Mom said, We need to get Gazoo to the animal hospital at Fun Jungle as fast as possible. Of course, Bubba agreed, and then he turned to Marge and threw her the keys. Take my car. I'll stay here with Vance. Get the Fitzroys and that koala back to Fun Jungle. Pronto. Marge wasn't happy being ordered to chauffeur us, but even she knew it was pointless to argue. All right, she grumbled. Come on, Mom said to me, motioning toward the police car. I don't need to go back to school? I asked. I think you earned a day off, Dad said. As we headed for the car, my fellow students arrived in force. They all swarmed around us, expressing concern for Kazoo and gaping at Vance Jessup. We saw you deck Vance, Xavier said. That was amazing. Lots of other kids echoed this. Dozens who had never even bothered to introduce themselves to me shook my hand and patted me on the back. I pushed through them all toward the police car. I have to go, I told Xavier. See you Monday? Oh, you bet, he grinned. As I reached the car, Violet Grace emerged from the crowd. How's Kazoo? She asked. He'll be all right, I told her. Violet sighed with relief and then glanced at Vance's prone body. You still have my phone number? She asked. I paused halfway into the police car. Yes, I said. The cheerleader gave me a shy smile. Then call me sometime, she said. Epilogue. One last surprise. Koalaville came down even faster than it had gone up. Doc Deacon, the head vet at Fun Jungle, had done a miraculous job of quickly nursing Kazoo back to health. But that was little comfort to the Australians. They had already been furious about the koala's theft. When the entire story was revealed that Fun Jungle hadn't properly installed the security cameras in the exhibit, that a keeper hadn't locked the door, and worst of all, that no one had noticed the koala's disappearance for more than a day. Fun Jungle's contract to display Gazoo was immediately revoked. Within 24 hours, a team of official koala ambassadors arrived to take Gazoo back home to Australia. To J.J. Mccracken's dismay, they still charged him a full $5 million he agreed to for 6 months of koala rental. And so, on a chilly slate-gray day, only a week after Kazoo had been recovered, my parents and I stood on the hill above Koalaville, watching the demolition crew flatten the koala exhibit as quickly as possible. It's not a bad exhibit space, I had said as the bulldozers churned toward it. Couldn't they have put another animal in it? Of course, Mom had said, but everyone will still think of it as Kazoo's old home. For a while, at least. J.J. Mccracken doesn't want that. The longer Koalaville stands, the longer it reminds people of Gazoo, Dad added, and Gazoo is a pretty big failure for Fun Jungle. I nodded, understanding. Under Pete Thwacker's direction, anything with Kazoo on it had been removed from Fun Jungle as quickly as possible. Banners had been taken down, park maps were reprinted, the brazier was packed up, and under the auspices of charity, thousands of Kazoo dolls, t-shirts, and other merchandise were shipped off to the developing world and distributed to poor people who didn't have enough toys and clothes or koala-themed snow globes. Luckily for Fun Jungle, at least, the Gazoo story had a happy ending. The koala hadn't died. And while the press had a field day with the theft, they and the public never learned about the real disaster that occurred that week. A sabotage at Shark Odyssey. Pete Thwacker had done an incredible job keeping a lid on that story. And perhaps more importantly, not a single shark had been hurt. However, it would be months before the tank could open up again. All the sharks had been moved to a different facility while the tank was drained and the glass tube was rebuilt. Meanwhile, park engineers are dreaming up new bells and whistles that could be added to bolster the story that Shark Odyssey was merely closed to enhance the viewing experience. In the meantime, Hank the Tank was in custody, as was Freddie Malloy, who the police had caught at the San Antonio airport trying to board a plane to Mexico. J.J. Mccracken was now quietly pressing charges against Walter Olagavy and the Nautilus Corporation. Olagavy was actually suing back, claiming that placing Hank in the room with an angry poo-throwing chimpanzee was illegal coercion, and therefore his confession had been under duress. Since no one had apparently ever used a chimp to exert a confession before, it was probably going to be a long time before that case was settled. Might even go all the way to the Supreme Court, Dad joked. Hank the Tank versus Furious George and his flying feces. As my parents and I watched Koalaville collapse like a house of cards under a bulldozer, within seconds, Kazoo's home was now gone. Seeing this bothered me more than I thought it would. I turned away and noticed someone else had come to watch the demolition. Christy Sullivan stood by herself uphill from us. The view was much better from where we were, but Christy had been avoiding my family, or maybe it was just me. Mom said Christy was still terribly embarrassed about her role in Kazoo's theft. And how all of her mistakes had ended up implicating me. Now, she seemed like she was on the verge of tears. Is Christy going to be fired? I asked. No, Mom sounded annoyed, though thankfully she's not going to be a keeper anymore. Instead, Pete Thwacker has transferred her to public relations. He claims that she had some attributes that would make her a strong asset to dealing with the press. What do you mean? I asked. That she's pretty, Dad explained. Mom frowned at the very thought of this. If that girl had been doing her job, Gazoo would never have been stolen in the first place. If that koala had died, it would have been her fault as much as Vance's. Any other zoo would have sacked her, but they gave her a promotion. I looked toward Christy again and caught her watching me. She quickly turned away, not wanting to meet my gaze. Then she pulled the hood of her parka over her head and hurried away. Though Mom was obviously angry at Christy, I didn't feel that way toward her. Yes, Christy messed up, and she hadn't done anything wrong on purpose. I was still more upset with Marge, who had been so determined to arrest me that she never even bothered to look for the real thief. To my relief, Tracy Boyd also shared this opinion. In fact, she was livid at Marge for botching this investigation. Marge wasn't going to be fired either, but she was getting demoted to shoplifting patrol while someone with actual crime-fighting experience was brought in to run park security. Yay, Marge is demoted. Meanwhile, Arthur Connick had been fired. I'd been right. He was the one who had stolen and then sold the photos of the tiger cubs. This was a violation of his contract, so Fun Jungle didn't even have to give him a 2 weeks notice. Security just showed up at his office and forcibly removed him from the park. Most importantly, Vance Jessup had also gotten the punishment that he deserved. 12 months in juvenile detention facility, which meant that he wouldn't be bothering me again for a long time. With Vance gone, Tim Jim had stopped bullying me, and everyone else as well. Maybe they were just nicer without Vance around, or maybe they'd been shamed after getting trounced by Dash and Ethan. Or maybe they were simply trying to be on their best behavior. Bubba Stackhouse was still figuring out if he could arrest them as accomplices in the Koala theft since they hadn't told the police about it. All in all, school had become significantly better since I had solved the crime and helped catch Vance Jessup. Maybe that's why I wasn't angry at Christy. While she unwittingly got me tangled up in the whole Gazoo business, I ultimately benefited from it. Lots of kids wanted to be my friends, wanted to be friends with me now. And since Xavier was my friend, they wanted to hang out with him also. Dash and Ethan were encouraging me to try out for the school soccer team in the spring. And Violet Grace now seemed to be interested in me rather than just my connection to Summer Mccracken. At Dad's urging, I called Violet. When the head cheerleader asks you to call her, you call her, Dad advised. But I didn't just do it because she was cute and popular. She was also really nice and turned out to be much less superficial than I originally thought. I'd been nervous to call it first, but it had gone pretty well. At one point, I mentioned that I could give her a private tour of Fun Jungle, and she jumped at the chance. She was going to come do it next Sunday. I didn't really think of it as a date, but Xavier certainly did. I think he was more excited about it than I was. Truthfully, even though I liked Violet, the idea of a date with her, or whatever it was, it felt a little bit wrong. Like I was cheating on Summer somehow. Which was crazy, of course. Summer and I were only friends. She was going to school 2,000 miles away, and she could be annoyingly distant at times. She hadn't even called me after Kazu was recovered. She only sent texts, a lot of texts, but still, it wasn't a substitute for talking. Plus, her own father didn't seem to care much for me. Yes, he acted friendly to my face. But over the past few weeks, he threatened my parents' jobs and allowed me to be arrested. And yet, once I had been proven innocent, he hadn't even so much as thanked me for my help, let alone apologized. I'd come to realize that J.J. Mccracken was far more slippier than I had thought. And sometimes I even caught myself wondering how much Summer was like him. While I was standing there, watching the Bulldozers with my parents, my phone rang. It was Summer. Any doubts that I had about her immediately melted away. I answered as quickly as I could. Hey, how are you? I should be asking you that, she said. You've been through a lot more than me lately. I'm fine, I said. Want to video chat? Nah, she replied. I've got a better idea. Turn around. I did. To my surprise, Summer was standing only 20 feet behind me. She was wearing a pink parka and a big smile. Her usual bodyguard stood a few steps behind her. I couldn't believe she was actually there. I kept staring at her dumbly, as though maybe she were simply a mirage. Dad gave me a nudge with his arm. What are you still hanging around us for? He asked. Go say hi. I tucked my phone in my pocket and trotted over to Summer. What are you doing here? I live here, Summer teased. Did you forget already? I mean, why aren't you still at boarding school? Isn't there still like a week until winter break? I took all of my exams early, Summer said. Like this was no big deal. I wanted to come home sooner. I wasn't enjoying school really all that much. Really? Yes, I thought you liked it there. Summer shrugged. It's nice and all, but it's kind of dull. This place is a lot more exciting. Hippo murders, koala kidnappings. Who knows what will happen next? Summer lowered her eyes. Plus, there's some things I missed here. I wasn't sure, but it looked like behind her curtain of blonde hair, Summer was blushing. Before I even knew what I was doing, I said, I missed you too. Summer turned even redder, but she looked up and smiled again. My dad will probably flip, but I was thinking of asking him if I could go to school here next semester. Despite all the excitement I had lately, being framed for a koala theft, getting caught in a shark tube, and punching out Vance Jessup, my heart was now beating faster than it had for anything else the previous week. Suddenly, I understood Dad's comment from a few days before. But how someday there'd be a girl that I'd do anything to get the attention of, no matter how stupid it was. That'd be awesome, I said. All right, that is the end of Poached, guys. There is a little note here from the writer Stuart Gibbs, and it's about koalas. Kind of starts off saying, Gazoo is not the only koala in danger. In fact, all the koalas are in serious trouble. Sadly, these adorable creatures are heading toward extinction. The primary reason for this is habitat loss. Koalas can live only in the eucalyptus forests, and those forests are being torn down all over Australia. Koalas used to be hunted for their fur. Today, they die from malnutrition, from being hit by cars, and from being mauled by pet dogs, and at a rate of thousands every year. Australia's wild koala population has dwindled from millions to only a few 100,000. Unless koala habitat is protected, soon the only place to see koalas may very well be in zoos only. And your grandkids might not be able to see them anywhere but a museum. But this fight isn't over yet. The koalas can still be saved. Find out what you, your friends, and your school can do to help them. Visit the Australian Koala Foundation online at savethekoala.com. If you're interested in helping protect other animals and critical habitats all around the world as well, check out these wonderful organizations. They list the World Wildlife Fund, which has their website, the Nature Conservancy, and the Center of Biological Diversity. I think that's kind of important to note about the koalas. If you guys remember from the stories that we watched earlier in the school year on CNN 10 in the morning during breakfast, they talked about the really bad wildfires that were happening in Australia. A lot of those wildfires burned habitat for a lot of animals. And unfortunately, these guys, the koalas, a lot of their habitat got burned too. And they were already in a pretty tough situation before those fires. And that's what Stuart Gibbs was talking about. So that's kind of something to think about, that unless we as a society make some changes, we're probably going to lose animals like koalas. We've already lost some, but he did offer some places where you could look, see if you could donate, support organizations that are trying to help them. Those are good things that you can look at. So that's the end of the book, guys. We are really burning through books like crazy. Thankfully, the school let me visit the classroom again, and I brought a whole bunch of books from the room. I know I've been letting you guys vote on the last couple books, but I think I'm going to make the pick this time. I'm going to pick a book that I want to read, and you guys will find out what that book is on Monday. And again, Let me know next week if you still haven't gotten your packet, and I can let Mrs. Van Black know. Because, like I said at the end of the last video, the mail system is running slower, is my understanding. And I know the packets were put in the mail last week on Thursday afternoon. Mrs. Van Black actually delivered them herself to the post office. So I'm not sure if there's another means of being able to get the packets to you guys. I know many of you have been able to access my stuff on Dojo, but I know some families have had issues getting it. And I've been more keen on getting the physical packets to families because I know, some of you have had spotty internet like I've had. Like, I am amazed that my internet's actually been running as strong as it has today, because yesterday it was a hot mess. And it seems every other day it's been like that, where I'll have one really good day and then the next day it's a hot mess where I can't do a whole lot. So for sure, let me know on Dojo by next week if you still haven't received a packet, and I could talk to Mrs. Van Black. Maybe we can figure out another way for you to get that packet. I know she is talking with the other administration teams at the ISD, trying to come up with a way to kind of help this out, because when we rolled out this, remote distance learning plan, we didn't anticipate the mail service slowing down. So my hope is that, you guys do get it. And if going forward with the packets, hopefully there'll be a plan in place. I will let you guys know as soon as I hear anything about that. But I would say if you are able to access the resources that I've shared on Dojo, that'll be your best bet to do some remote learning with your students at this time. I'm posting links to mystery science lessons on Dojo, so that'd be a good thing that they could do for science. I have shared with some families that wanted to let their kids do the Prodigy math program so they could practice their math skills. So that's a way they can get in a little bit of math. I've shared links to student accounts that I was able to get through the Epic website, which is a virtual reading library where you could download ebooks and audiobooks, so you could do some reading or listen to a book there. And I could always, I'm continuing to post social studies activities. Next week, be sure to be on the lookout. We will be finishing up at least with part of the Colonial America unit, where we're going to be looking at what did people do for work for, certain jobs. So I have a PowerPoint and a note taker for that. And there'll be some really cool videos that I found on YouTube about a lot of these jobs. And I'm going to share a link to that playlist that I made. And you guys could kind of take a look at all these jobs, and maybe, my hope would be that, you could research one and you could learn more about it and give me some facts about the job, a little bit more than what I provided. That'd be pretty cool. So I will be making those posts Monday morning, I want to say, will be when those posts will start showing up again. Kind of give you like a little bit of a couple of assignments to kind of work on throughout the week. So check back on Dojo for that. And also, I will be working on picking a day. I might do it on Wednesday. Part of my office hours will be that I will do a Zoom meetup with students. Again, it'll be like what I did last time, where students could come on, they could chat with me, chat with each other, and it could kind of give me an opportunity to also kind of ask, how are things going? Do you need any help with anything? I'm not planning on teaching a whole group lesson, but, if you have a couple questions that you need help with, I would be more than willing to help during that time. And I know if it lines up with their schedules, I know Miss Feather has mentioned that she would like to join on some of those chats, and I know Mrs. Van Black has also said if it lines up with her schedule, she would like to join also. So be on the lookout for that also, because I know you guys miss seeing each other. You miss talking to each other, and I miss seeing you guys. I know we did that meetup a couple weeks ago, And I enjoyed it. I had about 4 of you join me for that Zoom chat, and it was really nice to see you guys. And it was nice to see that you guys were safe, that you guys were doing things at home. Seemed like many of you guys, at least during the chat, you guys are, putting a good show, that you were in good spirits. We had the unofficial dog show. Everyone had to show their dogs. That was kind of cool. And show collectibles that they had in the house. Because I know, Zeke, you were one in particular that kept asking me about my Batman statue that I got up there. And I ended up showing that to those that stayed in that talk. So I'm thinking maybe Wednesday will be the day that I'll do it during my office hours, which run from 10 to noon. And I will also let you guys know by Sunday when to expect me to do the Read-Aloud. Because I know it's my goal to try to keep it at the same time. So I will try to pick a time to commit to next week, and that'll be the time for the Read-Aloud. So I know this has been a longer video, so I am going to kind of sign off now. You guys enjoy the rest of your Friday. Looks nice outside today. If you were able to, go outside. Go play outside. Go build a fort outside. Or play with your siblings outside. Do something fun outside. All right. I'll see you Monday.